At a time of renewed debate over slavery and its legacy,
slavery is the original sin.
Many U.S. leaders have staked key positions on policies related to race.
This legislation will not erase centuries of systemic racism and excessive policing in America.
But what about their own family ties to slaveholding? A first-of-its-kind Reuters examination reveals the extent of the connections between America's most influential public officials and what is commonly called the country's original sin. Reuters found that 118 of America's most powerful leaders have direct ancestors who enslaved Black people. They include 5 living presidents, 2 Supreme Court justices, 11 governors, and at least 100 of the 536 members in the last sitting Congress. Reuters sought to understand what it means for them to learn in personal, specific, and sometimes graphic ways the facts behind their own family's part in slavery. Few of the leaders were willing to talk to us, however. A team of reporters traced the family trees of some of the most influential politicians in the country. Correspondent Tom Lassiter worked on the report.
We took those initial sort of roadmap family trees and with a group of reporters went through and sought to verify each rung, each step, if you will, of the family tree. Used the census as sort of a main organizing document, but used many other sorts of documents. Birth records, death records, marriage announcements, contemporary newspaper reports, local history books. I spent a lot of time under the dome of the Library of Congress looking at local histories. Yeah, it could be quite a process. And again, that's examining those documents, but also looking for other documents such as wills, family Bibles, tax records that would establish whether it was the case that the ancestor in question had enslaved people.
The Reuters research was vetted by board-certified genealogists who reviewed each case that linked a slaveholding ancestor to a contemporary leader. From conservative Justice Amy Coney Barrett and Republican Senators Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham, to Democrats Elizabeth Warren, Tammy Duckworth, and former President Barack Obama. LaBrenda Garrett Nelson was one of the genealogists.
You know, the contrast between President Obama, whom you don't associate with enslavers, and then Amy Coney Barrett, that they're people at opposite ends of the political spectrum in many ways, but they have this in common, and that illustrates how integral a part slavery was to the country.
There's a discussion of slavery as a thing that just existed, and not a question of, well, who enslaved those people? I mean, specifically, who enslaved those people? And you know, who were their families? What did it mean for their families? Who were the people who they enslaved? What did that mean not only for the enslaved, but for those who came after them, their descendants? And I think there's a first basic step of just establishment of facts.
None of the 118 leaders identified by Reuters disputed the findings. Reuters made clear to each that it was not suggesting they were personally responsible for the actions of ancestors who lived 160 or more years ago. Even so, most remained silent on the subject. But Lassiter says the interviews Reuters did conduct were powerful, especially one with an Illinois member of Congress who called the information that Reuters unearthed gut-wrenching.
I interviewed Senator Tammy Duckworth, who was familiar with the genealogy with the family tree, because her family had an amateur genealogist who really sort of mapped a lot of it out. But she did not know, this is through her father's side, which is from Virginia, that her ancestors had enslaved people. And you know, she just spoke very frankly about sort of her sense of pride of being a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution, that if she was going to sort of celebrate that part of her family heritage, that she needed to also you know, reckon with and sort of look squarely at the fact that her ancestors, 2 of whom had enslaved people.
California Representative Julia Brownlee told us she was hit to the very core to learn an ancestor had enslaved 2 adults and 1 child.
I feel very much obligated to face up to my history, to learn my life and what happened, and to bend into it. I think it's important for each member of Congress in terms of their heritage, and it is important for them to know that and bend into it. I mean, we as policymakers, members of Congress, we want to move our country forward to sort of that more perfect union, if you will. But we can't do that without knowing the scars in our history as well.
The Reuters findings come at a time of renewed and intense debate about slavery's legacy in the United States.
A national reparations policy is a moral, democratic, and economic imperative.
And what, if anything, lawmakers should do about myriad matters related to race. From protests over police treatment of Black people, to the removal of Civil War-era monuments to the Confederacy, to how to teach about slavery and racism in American classrooms.
Slavery was one of the biggest sins in our country, and it's important for us to teach history and the truths of our history, knowing that our democracy is not perfect, and to keep that from children is not a good thing. We want our children to be critical thinkers, to understand the decades of slavery that took place in our country, decades of segregation that took place in our country, decades of continuing racial inequality in our country.
Finding out that information will help everyone move forward, says New York Representative Gregory Meeks, whose great-grandfather was enslaved.
You know, oftentimes when individuals say we need to go back to the way America was, I don't want to go back to the way America was. And I make sure that I articulate that to my colleagues. Seeking the truth makes us all better. It makes us understand what the past was so that we can also have a better today and tomorrow.
We saw consistently in the polling that those who said their families had enslaved someone, those who said they knew that their family had enslaved someone, were more likely to support reparations, for example, and that held true across party lines. Potential voters said that, knowing that candidates' ancestors had enslaved people might affect the way they voted. So I think I think these are, profound issues, not just of history, but of contemporary conversation in America.
I really believe, especially with respect to this Reuters project, that some of the notables whose genealogies we reviewed will pause and think about what it means that they, again, were kind of indirect beneficiaries of slavery. It wasn't something that just happened 200 years ago.